Every once in a while, I like to reflect on all God has taught me over the previous few months or years. We've talked about reflection before, right? In many ways, that's what both of my books, What Is Your Soul Love and Hold That Thought, are a gathering of life lessons learned at the feet of Jesus. Well, recently, I journaled my current central paradigms. I'm grateful for the grace of God shining a light on these important areas. Each of these informs how I view God, myself, and others. And over time, I long to grow in love in all three of these relationships. I'm Jem Fadling, and it's time for I Can Do That. Well, the list I'm going to share with you right now is not exhaustive, and it does not represent everything that is important to me. But it's where I'm at right now. It's a snapshot of a few important things, and it does embody what I hold dear in this season. So let's dig in. First one is God is love. Now, you're not going to be surprised to hear me say that because I say it all the time, but I think this is so important to remember all the time, and I need this. God is love. First John makes this very clear. And as I've said before, God is not elsewhere, right? The profound simplicity of this reality is life-changing for me, and I trust it is for you. Next, God is expansive. God is big and expansive, and I am invited into that fullness. Colossians 2 says, "For in Christ all the fullness of the deity lives in bodily form, and in Christ you have been brought to fullness." I can't wrap my mind around this, but I embrace it as the truth, and I long to experience it more and more. Next, I call this one the way of love, right? Zero-sum game, which is a game of winners and losers, is the lowest form of relational thinking. So I like to beware of either or, this, that, us, them, binary thinking. It's too small to encapsulate the complexities of life. The way of love leads to higher character, which leads to higher relating, living, and working. So a good question to ask is, what is the third way? And I've found that the third way usually leads with love. 1 Corinthians 13:7 says, "It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres." So I try to walk the way of love. Next is this idea. Character is vital. Our leadership comes from inside who we are. Focusing on who I'm becoming matters as much and even more than what I'm achieving. What does it matter what I achieve if my insides don't match my outsides? Dallas Willard has said, "All the church needs to fulfill Christ's purpose on earth is the quality of life he makes real in the life of his disciples." Character is about that quality of life that Jesus is making real in me. Next idea is God's ways span cultures. Now, God is personal and universal at the same time. And the big words for this idea are immanent and transcendent. God's being personal doesn't negate God's transcendence. God doesn't work one way for one person or group, but another way for others. God meets me as a fairly wealthy North American in the same spirit as he meets a woman living in rural Ethiopia. God is present to each of us personally. And the ways of God are universal, regardless of the different cultures in which he finds us. The implications of this are important because I can't preach a gospel that only works for some. It must work for all. Next, my view of time matters. Time is not our enemy nor our boss. I have agency and I get to decide how I spend my time. I understand this may look different depending on our life circumstances. Again, easier for those whose basic needs are already met. But if I have the freedom, then it's good to exercise that freedom and not remain enslaved to time. Time is a resource, not a boss. Finally, presence is primary. Presence is central to overall personal health and connection to others. The present moment is where everything happens. Now, I live linearly, which means I sometimes look to the past and the future on my timeline. And this can sometimes lead to regret or worry. And so I practice the present moment to engage God's grace, which is here and now. Presence is a beautiful and necessary spiritual practice, especially in my driven and distracted culture. Now, I wonder if you might have a few central paradigms bubbling under the surface. You could try giving yourself some time to write these things down, the things that you consider to be important wisdom for you in your current season. It might even become something you want to share with other people, like I just shared with you. But how do my thoughts inspire yours? Blessings to you, as always, as you engage your most important lessons. Here's your I can do that for this week. Set aside some time to journal your own current central paradigms. What's important to you right now? What has God deepened within you lately? What are you basing your life on right now? And how does all this affect what you share with other people? Take some time on that. Remember, you're making your way forward one small, simple, and gracious step at a time.